Have you ever felt like you're lugging around a suitcase full of stones, emotional baggage, in the shape of people who were never supposed to walk this journey with you? Today, I want to talk about that very moment when you must choose between preserving your peace or keeping company that costs you your joy. Stick with me. This is the conversation your soul has been craving. Keep the peace or keep the people. At some point in life, you face a choice: stay tied to familiar faces or stay true to your inner peace. It's a tough crossroads. Not everyone who's walked beside you is meant to follow you into your destiny. Some people were sent to you for a season, a chapter, a moment, a purpose. But they aren't meant to stay for the whole story. The real danger begins when you cling so tightly to a season that you strangle the possibility of a new chapter. Storms divine cleanup crews. Have you ever noticed how storms come for a reason? When God sends a storm, whether it's sudden heartbreak, a fiery argument, or unexpected solitude, it's often a divine intervention to clear the air. The storm tears down the old structures, relationships built on comfort rather than purpose, friendships rooted in convenience and alliances sustained by drama. If you try to rebuild what the storm deliberately dismantled, you're fighting a divine renovation. So ask yourself, why rebuild that collapsed bridge when the universe is inviting you onto a new path? Exhaustion. Is it the fight or the load? Some of you are bone-deep exhausted, not just from external battles, but from the invisible weights you're carrying. These aren't just responsibilities or physical toil. These are relationships hanging around your neck, like anchors. You might be living life well, showing up for work, checking off daily routines, and doing all the right things. Yet your joy is elusive. Your mind is foggy, and sleep feels like a distant luxury. Why? It's not your job. It's not your environment. It's the people you still cling to, the ones God told you to release, but your heart stubbornly holds. Convincing the unconvincible. Have you ever spent hours unpacking your heart to someone who was never truly listening? It's like whispering truths into the wind. You keep hoping they'll understand, that they'll change their viewpoint, that they'll finally see your best intentions. But here's the thing: if someone's mind is already made up, if their heart decided long ago to misunderstand you, no amount of words will change that. You're pouring precious energy into fixing what God already told you to let go. Insecurity, masquerading as loyalty. Let's get honest. How often have you chosen the pain of staying silent or staying hurt, just so you won't feel the quiet ache of separation? How many times have you swallowed your own needs so someone else doesn't have to experience discomfort? That's not love. That's fear posing as loyalty. You confuse connection with covenant. Just because someone is close to you doesn't mean they are spiritually or emotionally aligned with your journey. Covenants versus connections. There's a big difference between connection and covenant. A connection is like a bridge temporarily built for mutual gain, for a lesson, for a purpose. A covenant that's a soul tie bound in mutual support, love, and growth. Some people stroll into your life not to build you, but to test or even sabotage your strength. Your enemy doesn't always aim to destroy. Sometimes he wants to distract, derail, or diminish. And what better disguise than a friend with a criticism for every step you take forward? The everyday saboteurs. Picture this: you're about to soar, a promotion at work, a new project, a creative breakthrough. But your phone buzzes. A text from someone who says, "Are you sure? Remember what happened last time?" Or at a social gathering, someone drollingly says, "I'm happy for you, but don't get too full of yourself." Suddenly, your excitement dims. You hold back. You question your own purpose. That's not camaraderie. That's fear whispering old lies. And as long as you stay within their circle, you limit yourself to the old version of you, the version they can understand and control. Vivid imagery. fields of letting go. Imagine yourself standing in a vast field. To your left is a pile of rocks, each one labeled with a name, a regret, or a relationship. They're heavy, dusty, slowing you down. To your right lies an open horizon, alive with sunsets, possibilities, purpose. You can hold on to the rocks and stay rooted, or you can leave them behind and walk toward the sunrise. You choose sludge, or sunrise weight, or wings. Letting someone go mentally or emotionally isn't easy. It requires deliberate intention, courage, and often tears. You're not just cutting contact with a person, you're creating space for your highest self. You're making room for relationships that celebrate your unfolding, that challenge you with love, that encourage your evolution. You deserve alliances that feel like rocket fuel, not anchors. There's something profoundly sacred about your peace. It's more than just silence. It's more than stillness. Your peace is a sanctuary. It's strength in its purest, quietest form. It's the place where your prayers are born, not the hurried ones whispered in chaos, but the deep, soul-stirring ones that come when your spirit is still. It's where your clarity is restored, like fog lifting from the mind, revealing the path that was always there. It's where you hear the voice of God, not always loud, not always obvious, but unmistakably real. And yet, how often do we trade this sacred peace for noise that adds no value, for conversations that circle the same dead ends, for arguments that bear no fruit, only fatigue, for relationships that cost us pieces of ourselves, our identity, our joy, our calling? My friend, let me tell you, plainly, peace is not a luxury. It's not a reward you earn after struggle. Peace is a necessity. It's your spiritual oxygen. Protecting it isn't selfish, it's wise, and sometimes the very discomfort you're feeling, that unsettled feeling in your soul, that's God nudging you, pushing you, not to punish you, but to prepare you, because if everything stayed too comfortable, too familiar, too easy, you'd settle. You'd start accepting dysfunction as normal. You'd call chaos just life. You'd plant roots in soil meant only for passing through. And, worst of all, you'd miss the breakthrough, waiting on the other side of your obedience. If the fruit has turned rotten, stop watering the tree. Stop forcing what's already fallen apart. You are not called to keep alive what God is clearly trying to cut away. You are not required to maintain what heaven is attempting to move. And I know walking away can look like quitting. But sometimes it's not quitting. It's healing. It's not hate, it's maturity. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. And when you finally release, when you let go, with open hands and open heart, that's when you create space for God to step in. That's when you make room for divine replacements, the right people, the right peace, the right purpose. The reward of release. There's a freedom that's been waiting for you, a lightness in your soul you've long forgotten. It's been buried under the weight of someone or something that was never meant to be your responsibility in the first place. And please don't doubt yourself. You've been loyal. You've shown up. You've tried over and over again. You've forgiven beyond what most would. You've given second chances, third chances, silent prayers whispered in the dark when no one knew you were breaking. But now, it's time. Time to reclaim your peace. Time to remove your hands from what's no longer yours to hold. You don't need a dramatic reason. You don't need a detailed explanation. You don't even need a conversation because deep down you already know. The power of discernment. Your heart might be tender. Your mind might be wrestling. But your spirit, your God-given discernment, it doesn't lie. That quiet knowing inside you, that subtle shift you feel when someone's energy changes, that heaviness that sneaks in when their presence no longer feels like peace, but like pressure. That's not paranoia. That's protection. It's your inner compass warning you something's off. And often your spirit will sense it long before your mind can explain it. Trust that. Lean into that. That's God guiding you even through silence. Because here's the truth. Energy doesn't lie. Words can be dressed up. Smiles can be practiced. Even loyalty can be faked. But presence. Real presence. That's something you can't imitate. You can feel it. Have you ever walked away from someone without a single argument, yet felt drained, confused, maybe even a little discouraged, and you couldn't quite put your finger on why they didn't say anything harsh? They didn't do anything obvious, but something about their spirit left yours feeling heavy. That is not coincidence. That is a spiritual alert, a divine alarm built into your soul, placed there by God, and it's ringing for a reason. So why do we keep silencing it? Just to avoid conflict, just to keep the peace. Sometimes the most dangerous person in your life isn't the one who yells at you. It's the one who slowly, silently poisons your atmosphere. They don't openly attack your dreams. No, they just withhold their support. They don't cheer when you win. They don't speak life into your goals. They don't celebrate your growth or your glow. They just linger, watching, waiting. And every time you get excited about something, they don't say much. Maybe just a sigh, a quiet glance, or a small offhand comment that plants a tiny seed of doubt. They don't tear you down with words. They chip away at your confidence in silence, with side remarks, with energy that pulls instead of lifts. And somehow you stay. Why? Because it's familiar. Because the fear of being alone feels heavier than the weight of their negativity. But, let me ask you, what's the cost? Because being alone in peace is always better than being surrounded in chaos. You don't need to justify what your spirit already knows. That uneasy feeling in your chest, the emotional exhaustion that lingers after every interaction, that subtle anxiety that shadows their presence. It's not random. It's not your imagination. When God is in something, there's a different energy, a different clarity. Peace flows. Joy follows. Light shows up. But when something is not from Him, when the enemy is at work, confusion creeps in. It clouds your thinking. It twists your confidence. It makes you doubt what God already said about you. And you want to know one of the most overlooked signs of a negative presence. It's not how they act in the moment. It's how you feel after you leave them. Not while you're smiling. Not during the small talk. But when you're finally home, and the noise fades, and you're sitting alone with your thoughts. How do you feel? Lighter or heavier? Uplifted or unsure? Inspired or insecure? That's the real test. You used to walk with confidence. Now you hesitate. You used to pray with boldness. Now you second-guess your own worth. You used to move in purpose. Now you tiptoe in fear. That's not love. That's not friendship. That's emotional warfare, and it's happening in silence. We just talked about the quiet battles, those spiritual alerts, those heavy atmospheres, and the importance of recognizing who drains your spirit. Now, let's talk about what comes next. The courage to walk away, and the permission to protect your peace. God didn't anoint you to walk through life in confusion. He didn't call you to carry someone else's chaos as if it were your personal assignment. That weight, that emotional load, it was never yours to bear. You are allowed, yes, allowed to step away. You are permitted to protect your spirit. You have every right to say, "This no longer feels right," and to move with intention in the direction of peace. And when you finally do, when you start choosing clarity over confusion, peace over pressure, wholeness over chaos, don't be surprised when people start disappearing. Don't be shocked when your phone rings less often, when certain invitations dry up, when people you thought were for life begin to quietly drift away. Don't panic, it's not a loss, it's confirmation. Confirmation that their presence was only meant to be temporary. Some people can't survive in the atmosphere God is creating around you. The light inside of you, it irritates the darkness they're still clinging to. That's not rejection, that's revelation. And when that happens, let them go. You can't heal in the same environment that broke you. You can't grow in soil poisoned by jealousy, resentment, and control. You were never meant to blossom in a garden where manipulation is the gardener and bitterness waters the roots. You need fresh air. You need truth. You need space, sacred space, to rise, to stretch, to come alive again. And it all begins with one thing: honoring what your spirit already knows. Listening to that whisper that says, "There's more for you." Trusting that inner voice. And even if the path ahead feels unfamiliar, even if it means walking alone for a little while, walk anyway. Move in the direction of light. Now, let's get honest. There's a very fine line between loyalty and bondage, and too many people are walking around chained to relationships calling it commitment. Bound by old promises, trapped by guilt, shackled by the fear of being alone. But what if I told you that you're not staying out of love? You're staying out of fear. You're being loyal to someone who stopped showing up for you a long time ago. You're holding on to words that were never backed up by action. Holding on to patterns that never changed no matter how many chances you gave. You're clinging to a version of love that wounds more than it heals. But hear this: love was never meant to feel like prison. True love sets you free. Real loyalty never demands that you shrink to fit. If you have to make yourself small to stay, that's not loyalty. That's survival. And God didn't design you just to survive in your relationships. He created you to thrive. He shaped you to grow, to evolve, to walk boldly in truth, purpose, and peace. But when you stay tied to people who refuse to grow with you, slowly your light begins to dim. Not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. You stop dreaming out loud because they mock your passion. You stop taking steps forward because your growth makes them uncomfortable. And somewhere along the way, in the name of loyalty, you build a quiet cage, not for them, but for your own soul. But what if you were never meant to shrink? What if the version of you that's been hiding is actually the one God's been waiting to see emerge? We just explored the cost of loyalty when it turns into bondage, when your soul starts dimming just to keep someone else comfortable. Now, let's talk about the fine line between grace and self-betrayal, and the freedom waiting for you on the other side. Now listen, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being faithful. There's nothing wrong with standing beside someone in their weakness, holding their hand through the storm, choosing patience in a season that feels impossibly long. That's love. That's grace. That's what it means to be human, to show up for one another in the valley, not just the mountaintop. But hear me clearly, there's a difference between being patient with someone's process and becoming a prisoner of their dysfunction. Because here's the truth: some people don't want to grow. They don't want to change. They don't want healing. They don't want truth. What they want is control. And as long as you keep giving them that power, as long as you keep showing up, bending backwards, sacrificing your spirit, they'll keep taking. They'll take your time. They'll take your strength. They'll take your peace. And before you realize it, there's nothing left but a worn-out version of who you used to be. A shell, a shadow. And yet somehow you've been convinced that walking away makes you selfish, that choosing yourself is unloving, that stepping away is disloyal. But let me remind you of something sacred. God does not bless loyalty to dysfunction. He doesn't reward you for staying bound. He honors you when you step into freedom. Because it's in freedom that your ears can hear His voice again. It's in freedom that your heart begins to beat with purpose again. It's in freedom that you rediscover your worth, the worth that was buried under someone else's chaos. Pause, plus, reflection, moment. So don't confuse being needed with being loved. Some people don't keep you close because they cherish you. They keep you close because you're useful. You carry what they refuse to confront. You absorb their pain, take on their storms, fix what they keep breaking. And then they make a pattern, a system out of your kindness. But let's be clear, love that survives only through your constant sacrifice is not love. That's not partnership. That's not mutuality. That's dependence. And guess what? God never called you to be anyone's savior. That position is already filled. That cross already carried. If you have to lose yourself just to keep someone else, ask yourself, is it worth it? Because the more you disappear in their shadow, the more you forget the light God placed inside you. The more you silence your truth to keep peace, the more you trade purpose for proximity. You were never meant to hush your voice just to avoid conflict. You were never created to settle, just to feel accepted. You were never called to bear a cross someone refuses to lift on their own. Let's be real, you're carrying their anger, their bitterness, their fear, their immaturity. And you're calling it love. You're calling it commitment. But it's not love if it costs you you. So maybe it's time to check your heart and ask the deeper questions. Am I here out of love or out of fear? Am I staying because it's right, or because I don't know who I am without them? Am I holding on because it's healthy, or because I'm scared of the silence that might follow if I finally let go? Because fear has a way of dressing up in the costume of loyalty. Fear can sound a lot like obligation. It can whisper, stay, just stay. Maybe it'll get better. But while you stand still, your spirit is screaming to move forward. You can't rise while dragging the weight of what's been. You can't soar while babysitting someone else's bondage. You can't fulfill your calling while you're stuck playing the role of savior in someone else's chaos. Sometimes, the most powerful, the most holy thing you can do is simply say, I've done my part. I've prayed. I've waited. I've forgiven. But now I choose peace. We're going to talk about what choosing peace really looks like, not just emotionally, but practically. How to protect your spirit, set boundaries without guilt, and begin again without apology. Because you're not walking away from love, you're walking toward your healing. We've talked about choosing peace, about knowing when to let go of relationships that weigh down your spirit. But here's something you need to know next. The truth about obedience, about what heaven sees, even when the world doesn't. It won't always make sense to the world. It won't always be understood by the people around you, even those closest to you. They might question your decisions. They might not understand your silence, your boundaries, your distance. But that's okay. Because when heaven sees your courage to walk in truth, especially when it's hard, heaven responds. God sees obedience not just in the loud declarations, but in the quiet decisions. He honors those moments when you choose healing over habit, when you choose peace over pleasing people, when you choose to let go, even when it hurts. Sometimes the real miracle isn't in what God gives you, it's in what He removes from your life. Because once you release what's been draining your soul, that relationship, that weight, that toxic energy, you finally make space for what God's been trying to send all along. You can't pour living water into a vessel already filled with poison. You can't walk boldly in your purpose while your feet are tangled in someone else's chaos. So let's be clear, loyalty should never feel like a prison. Love should never chain you to pain. And you, yes, you child of God, were never meant to live like this, constantly guarding someone else's demons while your own go ignored. That's not your calling. That's not your burden. That's not your destiny. You were made for more, for freedom, for joy, for peace. that flows from the inside out. Let me tell you something today, and let it sink deep. Peace is not a luxury. It's not a reward you earn by suffering enough. It's not something you get after you've cried enough, prayed enough, sacrificed enough. Peace is not conditional. Peace is your birthright as a child of God. When to step back, and why, and when someone consistently, persistently, deliberately disrupts that peace, you have every right, every responsibility to step back and protect what God has placed within you. Because here's the hard truth: when your peace is gone, everything else starts to fall apart with it. Your clarity fades, your joy dims, your energy drains. Even your connection with God begins to suffer. Not because He's far, but because you're too weighed down by someone else's storm to hear His whisper. And it happens subtly. You don't even notice it at first. You brush off the tension. You excuse the disrespect. You justify the drama. You keep telling yourself it's just a season, or they're going through something. But eventually, the fruit doesn't lie. Powerful visual metaphor. Internal consequences. You begin to feel heavy emotionally, spiritually. You wake up anxious. You react sharply. You second-guess everything. You lose your rhythm with God, not because you stopped believing, but because you're too busy managing someone else's instability. And deep down, you know something isn't right. But you keep holding on thinking, maybe it'll pass. Thinking, maybe if you just love them a little harder. Give them a little more time. Sacrifice a little more of yourself. Maybe they'll change. But here's the truth. Peace doesn't grow in pressure. Peace grows in truth. And when someone shows you again and again that they don't value your peace, believe them. Don't keep granting access to someone who keeps disturbing the atmosphere of your soul. That's not compassion. That's compromise. And God never asked you to compromise your peace to prove your love. Some of you, you're not tired because life is too much. You're tired because your spirit is misaligned. You've made space in your life for someone who keeps bringing conflict, keeps stirring confusion, keeps pulling you into emotional chaos. And now your soul is suffocating not from the outside world, but from what you've allowed on the inside. We've been talking about the sacred power of peace and how God calls you to protect it. Now let's look even deeper at what happens when you stop confusing noise with direction and start recognizing who's really guiding your spirit. Let me remind you of something powerful. God is not the author of confusion. He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't guilt trip. He doesn't twist your emotions to get a response. That's not His nature. God operates with clarity. He corrects with love. He calls you with conviction, not chaos. So if the presence of someone in your life consistently leaves you feeling drained, scattered, unsure of your worth, then it's time to pause. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what am I allowing that God never sent? Because peace, true peace, is not just a blessing, it's also a choice. And too many of us keep giving that peace away, piece by piece, to people who never planned to protect it with us. Boundaries and bold decisions. Clarity and confidence. Protecting your peace means you have to set boundaries and mean them. It means learning to say no, without carrying guilt. It means stepping back, stepping away, and sometimes stepping out without needing to explain yourself to people who only want access, not accountability. Peace isn't just the absence of fighting. It's not silence after an argument. Peace is the presence of God, and you simply cannot afford to trade the presence of God for someone else's comfort. Yes, I know letting go is hard, especially when there's history involved, when you've prayed with them, when you've cried for them, when you've walked through dark valleys side by side, when your stories have intertwined for years. But there comes a sacred moment, a turning point when protecting your peace means choosing God over history. The shift familiarity versus freedom. It means choosing truth over familiarity. And when you do, you'll feel it immediately. You'll sleep deeper. You'll breathe lighter. You'll hear God's whisper again, clear and uncluttered. Because some relationships, as loud and present as they've been, have been drowning out the voice of heaven in your life. So don't confuse comfort with calling. Just because you've known someone for years doesn't mean they're meant for your next season. Just because you've weathered storms together doesn't mean you're called to build together. Some people were sent to teach you not to walk with you forever, and the very moment you stop holding on out of fear, you'll begin to live with freedom. Faith, peace, and purpose. The divine alignment. God is a God of peace. Jesus didn't die just so you could reach heaven someday. He came so you could experience life, abundant life, right here, right now. A life filled with righteousness. A life full of joy. A life anchored in peace through the Holy Spirit. But if your circle is filled with confusion, bitterness, manipulation, constant emotional chaos, don't be surprised when your peace starts to fade. You were never meant to sustain what God never assigned. It's not your job to carry relationships that are slowly breaking your back just to keep them from falling apart. Final message. Powerful, grounded, and uplifting. Because peace doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't compete. Peace stands. Peace trusts. Peace waits on the Lord. And the sacred moment you start choosing peace over pleasing people, that's when God moves. That's when clarity floods in. That's when your faith deepens. That's when your strength rises. Because peace makes space for purpose. We've talked about protecting your peace, about choosing freedom over fear, truth over toxicity. And now it's time to look inward, not just at what others have done to you, but at what you're still carrying within you. So today, I'm asking you to make a powerful choice. A choice not because it's easy, but because it's right. Choose peace. Not because it's the path of least resistance, but because your soul matters. Your mind matters. Your calling it matters. You can't keep sacrificing your sanity just to make others feel secure. That's not your job. That's not your role. That's not your assignment. Your responsibility is to walk in truth, to live in the light, to protect your peace. Like the treasure, it is not something cheap, not something casual, but something sacred. Reflection on emotional bondage. A shift within. The truth is, some of you are in bondage today, but it's not because of what someone did to you. It's not the betrayal. It's not the heartbreak. It's not even the silence. It's because of what you keep allowing to live inside your heart. You've forgiven with your lips, but not with your spirit. You've said you let go, but the bitterness still whispers when the world gets quiet. You're still carrying the weight of conversations that ended years ago, still rehearsing the betrayal word for word, still remembering every wound, every rejection, every silence that spoke louder than screams. But the deepest pain. It didn't just come from what they did. It came from the root, the one that you let grow when you refused to fully release them. Reframing forgiveness. The key to inner freedom. Let's get something clear. Forgiveness is not approval. It doesn't mean they were right. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It doesn't erase what happened. What it does is break the chains. Forgiveness says, I choose to stop letting this hold me hostage. Because bitterness, it doesn't destroy them. It destroys you. It eats away at your joy. It clouds your discernment. It poisons your peace. It builds walls around your heart, not to protect you, but to block healing from getting in. The real struggle of forgiveness. And why it's worth it. And I get it. I know it's hard. It's hard to forgive people who never apologized. It's hard to let go of people who broke you and walked away like nothing happened. It's hard to release pain that never got closure. But listen to me. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you do. You deserve to be free. You deserve to walk without carrying the weight of what they did. You deserve to feel the sunlight on your face without their shadow creeping behind you. Divine command. Practical freedom. God calls us to forgive, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Necessary for healing. Necessary for growth. Necessary for peace. When Jesus said to forgive 70 times 7, he wasn't giving us a math problem. He was describing a posture of the heart. That every time bitterness tries to creep back in, you choose love. Every time the memory replays like a movie, you choose peace. Every time the enemy tempts you to hold on to the anger, you choose freedom. The trap of unforgiveness and the way out. Because unforgiveness, it's deceptive. It makes you feel in control, but really it's a prison. A prison where the key is already in your hand. But your pride won't let you use it. A prison where your mind replays the same hurt over and over like a broken record that won't shut off. But hear me, God didn't call you to live trapped in yesterday. He called you to live free today. And part of that freedom, it's realizing this closure isn't always a conversation. Closure is a decision. You may never hear, "I'm sorry." You may never get the full explanation you think you need. But closure doesn't come from them. It never did. It comes from you, from the moment you decide that your peace is more important than their apology. We're going to talk about how to walk in that freedom, not just forgive, but flourish. How to move forward with clarity, confidence, and the kind of peace that no one can take from you. Because you were never called to survive the past. You were called to step into the future, whole, healed, and free. We just uncovered the truth about forgiveness, that it's not about letting someone off the hook, but setting yourself free. Now let's talk about what happens when you finally release it all. Into the hands of God. Healing doesn't begin with a moment of revenge. It begins when you lay it all down. That person, that pain, that betrayal that keeps replaying like a movie you never wanted to star in. When you bring it fully to the feet of Jesus, something sacred happens. He takes what you were never meant to carry, and in exchange, He gives you peace. That's the power of grace. That's the beauty of surrender. Defining forgiveness. Clearly and powerfully. Now let me be clear. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean giving them a key to the same door they once broke through. Forgiveness doesn't mean you welcome them back into your life just to let them repeat the same pattern all over again. No. Forgiveness means you release them to God. You stop gripping the pain. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to repair in the first place. You stop waiting for justice to arrive on your timeline, and start trusting that God sees, God knows, and God repays in His time, not yours. Unexpected healing. The power of letting go. And here's what might surprise you. Some of the deepest, most powerful healing you'll ever experience. It will come when you forgive someone who never even asked for it. When you stop trying to prove how wrong they were. When you stop rehashing what they did, and instead start walking in the truth of how right God is. That's when something shifts. That's when your heart begins to soften. That's when your spirit begins to soar. Because suddenly there's room space for joy to return, for clarity to rise, for love to flow back in. Not love from broken people, but love from a whole and perfect God. The tension between grace and grudge. Let me say this plainly. You cannot carry both grace and grudge. One will always outweigh the other. And if you keep clinging to that grudge, you will miss the grace. You'll miss the moment. You'll miss the healing that God has been trying to pour into your life all along. God's response to your prayer, a gentle command. Some of you have been crying out to God, "Lord, heal me, restore me, bring me peace." But do you know what God is gently saying back? Forgive them. Let it go. Make room for the miracle I've been waiting to give you. Final truth, freedom in the release. You can't pour new wine into old wineskins. You can't step into new life while holding on to old pain. You cannot move forward if your hand is still reaching backward. Yes, they hurt you. Yes, it was real. Yes, it left a scar. But your healing is real too. Your freedom is real. Your peace, it's not just possible. It's waiting. We talked about how real peace begins when you surrender the pain not to people, but to God. And now as we close, let's talk about the freedom waiting for you on the other side of letting go. Your future is still waiting for you. But hear me, it's not waiting at the end of revenge. It's waiting at the end of release. So today, choose to forgive. Not because they earned it. Not because they apologized. Not because they made it right. But because God has forgiven you. Forgive not because it's easy, but because it's holy. Not because you feel like it, but because you believe that freedom is always better than bitterness. There comes a time in life when we all must understand not everyone who walks with you is meant to stay with you. Some people, they were never meant for the whole story, only for a chapter. But if you're not careful, you'll spend your whole life rereading that same chapter, trying to rewrite it, trying to make it make sense, trying to hold on to someone God is gently or forcefully asking you to release. And the longer you stay in the space God has already moved on from, the more you delay your healing, you delay your growth, you delay your destiny. Because letting go, it's not weakness. Sometimes, it's the strongest thing you will ever do. It takes strength to walk away from what's familiar. It takes strength to stop trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. It takes strength to accept that the story won't end the way you hoped it would. Because the truth is, you can love someone deeply and still know they're not good for your soul. You can care with all your heart and still realize that staying is costing you more than it's giving you. Too many people confuse loyalty with bondage. They stay out of guilt, out of fear, out of a desperate attempt to not be alone. But what they don't realize is, staying connected to someone who pulls you away from your purpose is far lonelier than standing alone, with God by your side. Don't let someone else's chaos become your calling. Don't let someone else's instability rob you of your identity. If you constantly have to shrink just to keep the peace, if you have to silence your values to stay accepted, if you must compromise your joy to avoid conflict, that's not love. That's bondage dressed up as connection. And listen, God didn't create you to live bound. He didn't design you to spend your life dragging someone behind you who refuses to grow, refuses to heal, refuses to change. Some people, they are not interested in transformation. They are committed to staying the same. And when someone has shown you that, again and again, don't argue with it. Don't spiritualize it. Don't keep begging God to change them when what He's really trying to do is change you. Sometimes the real test isn't whether you can hold on. It's whether you can finally let go. And letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally saw clearly. You finally stopped pretending. You finally stopped settling for less than what God wants to give you. And when you let go, you make room. Room for new strength. Room for new vision. Room for relationships that don't drain you but build you. You open your hands so God can place something better in them. Something true. Something whole. Something worthy of the heart you've been giving to the wrong people. I know. It hurts. It hurts to let go of someone you prayed for, someone you fought for, someone you dreamed with. But sometimes Healing begins right there in the heartbreak, in that place where you surrender not because you're weak, but because you trust. You trust that God sees what you cannot, that what's ahead is greater than what you're grieving. That obedience, even painful obedience, will always lead to blessing, even if the blessing doesn't show up right away. And let me tell you, when you finally let go of the wrong person, peace will come in like a river. Not all at once, but gradually, steadily, unmistakably. You'll begin to breathe again. You'll wake up with clarity. You'll walk without the weight. You'll pray with fresh fire. You'll move without the burden. Because some people bring storms that only leave when they do. You were never created to carry the weight of someone else's choices. You are not responsible for fixing people who don't want to be healed. Yes, pray for them. Yes, love them even from a distance. Yes, hope for the best in their life. But you cannot lose yourself trying to save them. That's not your job. That's God's. And sometimes, God can do more with your absence than He ever could with your presence. But He can only move when you stop interfering. He can only step in when you step back. So today, I'm speaking to that part of you, the part afraid to release, the part that wonders what will happen if you finally let go. Let me tell you what happens. Your soul will breathe, your spirit will rise, your future will begin, and God will do what only He can do. He will restore, He will redeem, He will rewrite your story in a way that glorifies Him and frees you. So go ahead. Let them go. You don't need to hold on to what God is already removing from your life.